This is my take on the 2012 Mayan Codex of the end of the world that's supposedly supposed to take place, and I don't know that much about it. There aren't very many codexes left. The Mayans lived in southern Mexico for about 1,000 years, and then they died out. And they had a very good way of telling time, and I'm not quite sure what the codex says. But then I've also studied, like this, the hot zone. This is the Ebola virus, which is very, very lethal. And I've studied the influenza epidemic of 1918, and also Nostradamus's predictions. It's funny because I've got some of his books that were written in 1980, and they were saying things like, well, Russia and America would become great brothers, and I didn't believe that. And then it said the people of the crescent moon would take over Europe, and that's where the Third World War would start, and I didn't believe that. And then he talks about Barbary pirates, and that's off the Barbary coast of Africa, and they didn't have pirates back in 1980, but they have them now. So I'm wondering if some of these predictions may be coming true. Like I said, I follow patterns. I don't know, it's just an interesting mystery. But we look at one of his quatrains, and he had a bunch of four-sentence mysterious like poems, and they predicted things to happen in the future, because I believe he was born or died in 1666. Michael D. Nostradamus. I believe he saw many futures. The one thing that was interesting was maybe he saw things that our whole life is a movie, and maybe he just saw ahead of what is going to happen, and that's just fate. I don't know. But some of his quatrains are, one of them is about Mavis. Mavis will soon die, and there will become revenge from hundreds of hands. Now, I've always thought Mavis, a few years ago, was Masood Abbas of, I believe he's the leader of the PLO, but he's an old man now. And I thought, well, maybe it's him. And then he stepped down, and then he stepped back up, and stepped down, stepped back up. And he's up now. So with the Palestinian papers out, I'm thinking, well, maybe he could be the Mavis. And then also, as a painter, you know, we talked about the epidemic, and the doctors have been lying to us for a year about this H1N1. It's regular flu. This is the mortality rate that happened in 1918 with the it was either a swine flu, or they found out it was a bird flu. And what happens is it jumped to man. Now, not only did it jump to man, but if you want to know how lethal this flu was, think about the worst flu you've ever had, 1 to 1,000, and it was a 50, okay? Now, this bird flu of 1918, or swine flu, they're not sure if it jumped from pigs or birds. What they do know is that man had none or very little resistance against it. Now, if you think of your worst flu as 50, this flu, on a scale of 1 to 1,000, was a 450. People would literally catch it in the morning and die in the evening. What it did was, it was such a super flu, it basically ripped the body up. It just destroyed the body. That's why people died. Now, we've had experts that have gone up to Alaska, and they have dug up people that died up there of the flu. They were fast frozen, and they've taken blood samples and tissue samples and found and studied that flu, which is basically alive but frozen in their bodies, and confirmed that they believe it was an avian flu. Now, this is what they're not telling you, and I've studied diseases for a long time. This is the Ebola virus right here, or you can look right here. Okay, now the Ebola virus, along with the current swine or bird flu virus, is what's called man-to-man, or person-to-person, or pig-to-pig. You have to come in close contact with them to catch it. Alright, this is a regular virus. Now, all viruses will do the same thing. This is what the scientists are afraid of, is that this virus, not the Ebola, well, it could, if the Ebola mutates, it'll be worse. But if the swine flu virus mutates and goes airborne, this is the difference. What happens is the virus grows little tiny hairs on it, little tiny filaments, okay, little teeny ones. And what happens with that is it's able to float on the air. Okay, if it floats on the air, then it will be about 1 billion times easier to catch. If any of these viruses, swine flu, Ebola, Lassa Valley, get any of these hairs on it, like they did in 1918, then we're in for a hell of a pandemic. So that's what they're really afraid of, and we don't know if our virus drugs will save us from that. And you say, well, yeah, a lot of people get sick, they'll die. Well, what that can do is that can change the power ratings of the world. It can shift the power, cause instability, war, famines, everything else. That's what can happen. Now, Nostradamus predicted another thing. He said that something will come over the North Pole without law, something 150 miles from the hemisphere. Now, we think that's the Earth, and it's a satellite, but he said hemisphere, not sphere, which we live on. And then he said it will rain, when all this happens, it will rain blood and milk. Now, as a painter, I've gone up and dealt with sick birds up in houses where I've had to clean up their nests. When birds get sick, and especially with these flu-like things, they, excuse my French, they shit blood and white bird shit. So that could be blood and milk. And if that happens, then we're in a lot of trouble. Now I'll go on to some of his quatrains that deal with the Mideast crisis we're having right now, which is interesting. That'll be in part 2.